Some analysis. Paul Jackson, Professor of the History of Radicalism and Extremism at the University of Northampton, joins us live. Paul, thanks for being with us. What do you make of that Musk salute?
Well, I mean, I think it's not particularly surprising given the kind of the wider pattern behaviour we've seen from Musk over the past few years. I find it also quite interesting, I suppose, to see the kind of the debate about whether or not this should constitute a fascist salute. As a historian of fascism, I think that this very much is a fascist salute, and it's quite clear, what the intention was to symbolise. So yeah, it's a very interesting development to see. I think one of the things to kind of say about it, though, and it kind of in a way undermines this whole segment, is one of the points of doing this sort of thing is to be provocative, and it is to create these sorts of media appearances.
Sometimes he feels a little fourth form, doesn't he? So like an adolescent trying to shock for the sake of it.
Well, perhaps. And as I say, I think there is something attention grabbing about this. And I think that's probably quite a large part of the point of doing this sort of thing. As I say, I think the symbol is clearly a fascist salute. Whether that makes him a fascist is perhaps much more complex and debatable, let alone Donald Trump. So I think we're seeing a kind of a particular kind of phenomenon here about seizing the agenda, creating shock and outrage, creating a certain kind of mood around the sense of the inauguration and such like. So I think we need to be a little bit careful about not to hype this as well.
Indeed. So let's not let's not hype it. But earlier this month, Musk sat down for it's been described as an interview, but that would give it journalistic credence. It was a conversation, quite a fawning conversation, with the head of the Alternative for Deutschland, which is the far-right group in Germany. And he was very praising and very bowed down to, in many ways, Alice Weidel, their leader. Doesn't that give the salute a different kind of context?
Well, I mean, I don't think it's too tricky to kind of make the argument that Elon Musk is kind of serially engaging with sort of a far or extreme right politics and that sort of agenda. In the UK, he's been supportive of people like Tommy Robinson as well. So we can kind of see a kind of a long-standing pattern here. He's also been doing things over the last few years like reposting Beppe the Frog memes, which is quite a well-known far and extreme right symbol. I suppose the word fascism in particular has a sort of a specific set of meanings. And I suppose one of the things to kind of say about this, his defence, is that he has said that the fascism attack is quite overdone. Whatever we can say about the Trump election, there was quite a lot about fear-mongering around Trump being specifically a fascist, and that didn't seem to stop him get elected. So the word fascism and the meaning of fascism perhaps is also in the modern context, something to think about here. And maybe it's losing a certain sense of aura or significance as well.
I think you're right. I think it's been diluted completely because of the over accusation of it, I think. And it's created this situation, and more people are feeling more and more at home with those kind of extreme views, hard right, to give it a less explosive label, I suppose, and certainly that would be the case in the UK. Just to pick up on the Tommy Robinson remarks, Stephen Yaxley Lennon, the jailed far-right extremist, I think it's fair to say, who Musk says should lead the Reform Party rather than Nigel Farage. Nigel Farage, of course, famous for his stance creating Brexit and having very sort of like far-right, hard-right views, shall we say. And again, Musk interfering with things to create a more far-right agenda. Again, we're trying not to say this is controversial or trying to be controversialist about it. However, his actions and his gestures seem to point that way.
Yeah, well, as I say, the word fascism is perhaps a little bit tricky. I think the word hard right is perhaps a bit woolly and problematic. I think the term far right is quite sort of well understood as a general term. So he is in that far right space for sure. As I say, he's engaging with parties who are also in that far right space, sometimes at the more legal end of the spectrum, sometimes crossing over the line into illegality, as we've seen with people like Robinson. So, and as I say, he's kind of playing around with the various symbols and such like of that movement online as well through Twitter. So he's definitely in that space. I mean, exactly how you might want to place him is perhaps a little open to debate, but that's where his politics very much seems to be. And as I say, that's a successful politics in America at the moment, more broadly, and that's, I find at least, quite a worrisome development in the modern world.
Add to that the fact that he is so rich, $400 billion in his back pocket. He could go out and buy a football team tomorrow if he wanted to, couldn't he? He's got that kind of cash. If he didn't have that kind of cash, he might come across, say, as a kind of barroom bore who stands there sort of spouting off at the bar, that kind of thing. But he isn't that person. He's a very rich person who has the ear of the US president. And we're seeing policies from Trump which are, I think, more and more extreme.
Yes, as I say, I think making too many sort of straight comparisons with the interwar era and fascism is problematic, not least because you don't see the newness to what's being developed here. So this is something different, and that's probably why it's succeeding. You know, the sort of the truly neo-Nazi groups in America aren't getting elected, but they are getting a boost from all of this as well. But with Musk, perhaps in particular, one of the kind of the concerning things, I suppose, is also around the atmosphere around the changing dynamics of social media, which obviously he's pioneering through his purchase of Twitter, now X. So the ways in which moderation and much more extreme content are becoming much more prevalent on those platforms. For a few years at the beginning of this decade, it seemed to be sort of traveling in the other direction, but now a lot of that moderation is going. Well, that's going to create an ever kind of more kind of complex and messy environment of problematic views, extremist views, all the rest of it being quite freely disseminated to large numbers of people online. So as well as having the ear of the president, as you put it, he has that power, and they're connected as well. And that's probably how this nexus has helped has sort of emerged.
Indeed. Paul Jackson, pleasure speaking to you. Thank you for shedding light on the situation and giving us your analysis. We really appreciate it. Paul Jackson, Professor of the History of Radicalism and Extremism from the University of Northampton there in central England. Paul, thank you for joining us. We continue to watch all developments, of course, on Trump, Trump's entourage, Elon Musk, and everything that's happening in the United States. Let's turn now to the Middle East.